This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas.
The voice inside your head right now. The one listening to my words. The one deciding what you'll have for lunch later. Or, analyzing whether you agree with what I'm saying.
Right.
That voice, that unified central you sitting right behind your eyes, driving the machinery of your body. Oh, it doesn't actually exist.
No, it doesn't.
At least not as the unified CEO you think it is.
It is the ultimate illusion.
Yeah.
And it's so convincing that we have literally built our entire civilization around it.
We really have. I mean, our legal systems, our institutions, our technology.
Yeah, all of it.
So today we are setting up a massive reality-bending premise for this deep dive. Our mission today is to completely shatter the illusion of the singular mind.
Which is no small task.
No, definitely not. We're going to look at the human brain, obviously, but we're also going back to the foundational days of artificial intelligence in the 1970s and 1980s.
Sourcing heavily from Marvin Minsky's incredible book, The Society of Mind.
Exactly. And then we'll be looking at the astonishing, honestly, almost alien ways that forests and fungi communicate.
The Wood Wide Web.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we are going to find a common thread through all of these. A unified blueprint for how intelligence actually works, whether it's, inside your skull, inside a supercomputer, or buried 4 feet beneath a Douglas fir tree.
It's a profound paradigm shift. I mean, for centuries, the prevailing model of the mind was top-down.
Right. The boss giving orders.
Exactly. The rational executive making decisions and handing down orders to the body. But the reality is that intelligence isn't top-down at all. It is bottom-up.
Okay, let's unpack this.
It's a massive decentralized society of entirely mindless robotic agents working in chaotic concert.
It sounds crazy. So if we want to understand how a mind works as a society, we first have to basically tear down your current understanding of yourself.
We have to fire the CEO.
We do. And the most compelling, undeniable way to do that is to look at what happens when the human brain is physically, literally split in half.
Yeah, this takes us into some of the most extraordinary neuroscience of the 20th century. We are talking about split brain patients.
Right.
To understand this, we need to quickly look at the architecture of the brain. You have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. And connecting them is this thick, dense highway of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum.
It's essentially a massive broadband cable, right?
That's a perfect way to describe it.
It allows the left side of your brain to instantly share data with the right side.
Precisely. But in very extreme medical cases, specifically with patients suffering from debilitating, life-threatening epilepsy, that electrical storm of a seizure would start in one hemisphere, and it would use that broadband cable to spread to the other,
causing a massive grand mal seizure.
Exactly. So neurosurgeons developed a radical treatment. They would go in and physically sever the corpus callosum.
They just cut the cable.
They cut the cable entirely. And the crazy thing is, it worked for the epilepsy. The seizures were contained.
But it created a fascinating, almost science fiction level scenario for researchers, right? Like the neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga.
Oh, Gazzaniga's work here is legendary because suddenly you have a human being walking around with 2 hemispheres that can no longer talk to each other.
They're totally isolated.
They operate entirely independently in the exact same skull.
And this isolation allows us to test what each hemisphere actually does on its own.
Yes, because they have very different specializations. The right hemisphere is highly involved in spatial processing and visual information.
But it's moot, right?
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
It has almost no language capability. The left hemisphere, however, is the chatty one. That is where the speech and language centers primarily reside.
So Gazzaniga and his team set up these incredibly clever experiments. They would have a split brain patient sit in front of a screen.
Right.
And they would use a divider so that the patient's left eye could only see the left side of the screen and the right eye could only see the right side.
And this is key because of how our optic nerves cross.
Right. Everything shown to the left visual field goes strictly to the right hemisphere.
Yes.
And everything shown to the right visual field goes strictly to the left hemisphere.
This allowed the researchers to secretly pass notes to just one half of the brain.
Which is wild to even think about.
It is. In one classic setup, they flashed the word walk on the side of the screen that fed exclusively to the right hemisphere.
The mute hemisphere.
Exactly. Now, the right hemisphere can comprehend basic commands, and it controls the left side of the body.
Okay.
So, upon seeing the word walk, the patient just stands up and begins walking across the room.
But then the researchers stop the patient and ask a simple question. They say, "Why are you walking?"
And this is where the illusion of the unified self completely breaks down.
Yeah, it really does.
The left hemisphere, the part of the brain that handles language, the part that is currently formulating the verbal answer to the researcher's question, never saw the word walk.
It was completely in the dark.
It has absolutely no idea why the body it inhabits just stood up and started walking.
Logically, you would think the patient would just say, "I don't know."
Right.
Or, "I felt a sudden urge to walk, but I'm not sure why."
But that is never what happens. The left hemisphere does not admit ignorance. Instead, it instantly and confidently invents a completely fictional explanation.
It just makes something up.
It will say something like, "Oh, I was just going to go get a Coke from the fridge."
It just lies.
It lies, but it doesn't feel like a lie to the patient. It's a post hoc rationalization.
Wow.
The left hemisphere genuinely believes the story it is telling. It observes the body walking, recognizes it doesn't know why, and instantly fabricates a plausible narrative to make sense of the action.
There is an even wilder experiment that really hammers this home. The researchers showed two different images simultaneously.
Oh, the chicken and the shovel.
Yes. To the right hemisphere, they flashed a picture of a snowbank.
Right.
To the left hemisphere, they flashed a picture of a chicken claw.
Then, they placed a bunch of picture cards on the table in front of the patient and asked them to point to the cards that matched what they saw.
Okay, so the patient's left hand, which is controlled by the snowbank-seeing right hemisphere, points to a picture of a snow shovel.
Which makes perfect sense. Shovel goes with snow.
Right. And the patient's right hand, controlled by the chicken claw-seeing left hemisphere, points to a picture of a chicken.
Again, totally logical. Both isolated sides of the brain are functioning perfectly. They are solving the puzzle based on the distinct data they actually received.
But then comes the trap.
Yes.
The researcher asked the patient, "Why did you point to those two items?"
And remember, the verbal answer is generated exclusively by the left hemisphere.
Right, the chatty one.
The left hemisphere knows exactly why its hand is pointing to the chicken. It saw a chicken claw,
Okay.
but it is staring at the left hand pointing to a snow shovel, and it has absolutely no context for it.
Because it never saw the snowbank.
Exactly, and never saw the snow.
And without missing a single beat, the patient says, "Oh, that's simple. The chicken claw goes with the chicken, and you need a shovel to clean out the chicken coop."
It is an astonishing feat of mental gymnastics.
It really is.
It seamlessly weaves the rogue shovel into the chicken narrative. It completely ignores the reality of the snowbank that it never experienced and creates this unified, logical-sounding story to explain the body's behavior.
This completely blew my mind when I first learned about it.
Yeah.
Because the implication here is terrifying.
Oh, it shakes your entire worldview.
Yeah. If the brain is perfectly willing to fabricate a completely false reality just to maintain a sense of unified control, I mean, what else is it making up?
Gazaniga dubbed this mechanism the left brain interpreter.
Right.
And the terrifying implication, as you put it, is that this interpreter module isn't just a quirk of patients who have had brain surgery.
Right, we all have it.
We all have it. Its entire evolutionary function is to constantly generate explanations for our actions, our emotions, and our rapid responses to a chaotic environment.
It's like having a hyperactive public relations manager living in your left hemisphere.
And that is exactly what it is.
Your body and your unconscious mind are constantly doing things, reacting to stimuli, processing emotions, making split-second physical calculations. And this PR manager is sitting at a desk watching the raw output of all these systems and constantly spinning a narrative to make it look like the CEO was in charge the whole time.
This leads to a phenomenon in cognitive science called confabulation. We are constantly guessing at the plausible explanations for our own behavior, and then we encode those guesses as absolute, certain truths.
Wow.
We are shockingly ignorant of the actual underlying neurological causes of our own choices. Yet we walk around with this profound feeling of intimate, direct knowledge of our own motivations.
Okay, hold on. Stop. I need to push back here on behalf of everyone listening.
Please do.
Because as I sit here right now, I don't feel like I'm guessing. If I decide to pick up my coffee cup right now, I feel the desire for coffee. I consciously form the intent to grab the mug, and then my hand moves. That is a top-down command. You were telling me that is just a story my PR manager is spinning.
I am telling you exactly that, and we have the functional MRI data to prove it.
Wait, really?
Yes. Various neurological studies building on the classic Libet experiments have shown that if we monitor your brain activity while you make a conscious choice, like pressing a button with your left hand or your right hand, we can see the unconscious neural networks committing to a specific choice long before you are aware of it.
How long before?
Up to 7 seconds.
7 seconds.
Yes.
That is an eternity. You're saying my brain decides to pick up the coffee cup 7 seconds before I actually think I decided to do it.
In some contexts, yes, 7 seconds. The complex, unconscious modules in your brain crunch the data, evaluate your thirst, calculate the spatial coordinates of the mug, and initiate the motor sequence.
My conscious mind is just out of the loop.
The conscious feeling of I am deciding to do this right now is an after-the-fact receipt.
A receipt?
It is a secondary effect generated by the left brain interpreter so that you have a coherent story to tell yourself and others.
Okay, that is deeply unsettling.
It challenges everything.
It really does. If I am not the driver of my own car, then, well, who is?
That is the fundamental flaw in how we think about intelligence. We need to completely abandon the car analogy.
Okay.
For centuries, we have visualized the mind as a vehicle and consciousness as the driver sitting behind the wheel making decisions and steering.
Right. The homunculus.
Yeah.
The little man in the head.
Exactly. But if you open up the brain, there is no steering wheel. There is no central control room. The brain is much less like a car being driven and much more like the phenomenon of traffic.
Traffic. Okay, walk me through that.
Think about it. If you want to understand why a massive traffic jam happens on the highway at 5:15 p.m. on a Friday, you cannot figure it out by looking at a single spark plug.
No.
You can't figure it out by looking at a single steering wheel or even a single driver. Traffic does not exist at the level of the individual car.
Right. No single person decided to create a traffic jam. It just, happens.
It is an emergent property. It arises spontaneously from the interactions of thousands of individual cars, drivers, the weather, the layout of the off-ramps, and the timing of the stoplights.
So it's a systems thing.
Exactly. A completely new set of physical laws and behaviors emerges at the macro level that you could never predict just by studying the microcomponents.
So you're saying my mind, my personality, my intelligence, my consciousness is traffic.
Yes.
It's the emergent result of thousands of unconscious parallel processes interacting.
Exactly. The unified mind that we feel is present is just the emergent hum of millions of lower-level neural circuits operating simultaneously.
And the PR manager.
The left brain interpreter is just the traffic reporter in the helicopter looking down at the chaos and trying to tell a neat, coherent story about it for the evening news.
Oh, wow. That's a great analogy.
It provides narrative stability, which is highly useful for human social interaction, but the reporter in the helicopter is not the one causing the traffic.
Okay, so if the brain is just this massive decentralized society of unconscious processes, how do those processes actually build something as complex as human intelligence?
That is the big question.
To answer that, we have to look away from neuroscience for a moment. We actually have to travel back to the artificial intelligence labs at MIT in the 1960s and 70s.
This is a crucial pivot in our deep dive because long before functional MRI machines could watch the brain light up, computer scientists were trying to build minds from scratch.
Right.
And they ran into the exact same realization. We are talking specifically about Marvin Minsky and Seymour Papert, the foundational figures of AI.
Yeah, they were trying to figure out how to make a machine think. And initially, they probably thought, like everyone else, let's write a really complicated master program, a central CEO.
And they realized incredibly quickly that it is impossible. You cannot program a single monolithic intelligence into a computer.
Because intelligence isn't a thing.
Exactly. It's a collection of a million tiny, very dumb things.
They demonstrated this with a project called the Builder. This is fascinating. The goal was seemingly simple, almost laughably simple.
Right.
They wanted to create a robot with a primitive mechanical arm and a television camera for an eye. And they wanted this robot to build a simple tower out of children's wooden building blocks.
To a 4-year-old child, stacking blocks is just play. It feels effortless.
Yeah, my nephew does it without thinking.
Exactly. But mechanically, computationally, it is a nightmare of complexity.
Let's break down what actually has to happen to stack 2 blocks. The master program, the builder agency, can't just execute one command.
No, it has to act like a general contractor.
It calls upon subagents. First, it needs an agent whose only job is to find a block,
Hmm.
then an agent to get the block, then an agent to put the block on the tower.
But even a command like get is vastly too complex for a machine.
Right. How do you get something?
So the get agent has to delegate to its own subagents. It calls on an agent called move to swing the mechanical arm over the block. And then it calls on an agent called grasp to close the robotic fingers.
And the find agent can't just magically locate a block either. It has to delegate to a C agent, which analyzes the video feed from the camera.
And programming that C agent in the 1970s was brutal.
Because a block looks different if the light is hitting from the side.
Exactly. Or it looks different if it's partially hidden behind another block. It looks different from a top-down angle versus a side angle.
Okay, so what's fascinating here is Minsky's absolutely critical revelation.
Yes.
Look closely at all these individual agents. Find, get, put, move, grasp. See, not a single one of them have any intelligence whatsoever.
Right. The grasp agent doesn't know it's building a tower. It doesn't even know what a block is.
It is literally just a dumb switch that says, if activated, close these two metal pincers until resistance is met.
They are completely mindless. They only react to very specific, narrow inputs. And yet when you network enough of these mindless, completely blind agents together and they start triggering each other in specific sequences, well, the emergent behavior looks exactly like intelligence.
Minsky had a profound conclusion from this. He said, minds are simply what brains do.
I love that quote.
Intelligence isn't some magical, ethereal substance. It isn't a singular spirit. It is the emergent property of thousands of specialized, perfectly mindless agents forming a complex society.
He makes a brilliant distinction between an agent and an agency to explain how we are fooled by this.
Okay, break that down for us.
An agent is the simple, mindless mechanism. An agency is what it looks like from the outside when a bunch of agents work together.
Let's use a tangible example to make this super clear for you listening. Think about the steering wheel in your car.
Right.
When you are sitting in the driver's seat commuting to work, you treat the steering wheel as an agency. Its entire job, from your top-down perspective, is turn the car.
You don't care how it works. You just interact with the interface. It appears to possess the complete competence of steering.
But what happens when the steering column breaks?
Yeah.
You pull over, you pop the hood, and your perspective fundamentally shifts.
You stop looking at the system as a unified agency, and you are forced to look at it as a collection of individual agents.
Right, you look at the steering shaft, the rack and pinion, the tie rods, the fluid pump.
And if you hold up a single pinion gear from that system, it's just a chunk of metal with teeth.
That gear doesn't know how to steer a car.
It doesn't know what a car is. It only knows one completely mindless rule. When pushed by this other gear, turn slightly to the left.
When you look at the Build-A-Robot from the outside as an agency, it looks intelligent. It looks like it understands the concept of architecture.
But when you pop the hood and look at the code, there is zero understanding. Just mindless switches triggering other mindless switches.
And Minsky argued that human intelligence, human consciousness is exactly the same. We are a society of mindless agents.
We just have billions of them, polished by millions of years of evolution, instead of a few dozen programmed in a 1970s MIT lab.
This concept was so radical that when Minsky wrote his magnum opus, The Society of Mind, he realized a traditional linear textbook wouldn't work.
No, the medium had to match the message.
So he wrote the book as 270 interconnected, self-contained essays. There's no strict hierarchy.
It is a decentralized web of ideas, perfectly mirroring the decentralized mind he was describing.
Let's do a deep dive into how Minsky believed these mindless agents actually learn and create human thought. Because it's brilliant.
It really is.
He categorized different learning strategies that our internal society uses. And it perfectly explains how toddlers learn about the world. For instance, he talks about a process called uniframing.
Right. Uniframing is when your agents generalize. They encounter several specific instances and combine them into one broader rule to save computing power.
So imagine a toddler. They see a golden retriever. The parents point and say, dog. Then they see a poodle. Dog. They see a beagle. Dog.
The toddler's mindless agents uniframe this data and create a broad rule. A creature with 4 legs, fur, and a tail is a dog.
Exactly. It's a highly efficient heuristic. But it's also prone to errors. Because the next day, the toddler goes to a farm, sees a horse, points at it, and confidently says, dog.
I've seen kids do exactly this.
We all have.
Yeah.
Because according to the uniframed rule, the horse fits perfectly. 4 legs, fur, tail.
Which triggers the next learning strategy in Minsky's society. Accumulating.
Accumulating is when your agents start collecting examples that violate the general rule. The toddler is told, no, that's a horse, it's much bigger,
So the agents accumulate this exception.
which leads to reformulating.
Right. The society actually modifies the original rule based on the accumulated exceptions. The rule becomes 4 legs, fur, tail, and relatively small is a dog. 4 legs, fur, tail, and massive is a horse.
And he also had this concept called transframing, which is how we bridge structures across entirely different domains. It's how we understand metaphors.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, we map the agents we use to understand physical space like up and down on abstract concepts so we can understand what someone means when they say they're feeling down today.
All of this relies on an incredibly powerful concept Minsky introduced called frames.
Frames, right.
Because our society of agents needs to process chaotic environments instantly. If you walk into a new room, you don't have the processing power to analyze every single pixel of visual data from scratch.
Right. A frame is basically a default assumption. It's a skeletal outline of a concept filled with default slots.
Think about the concept of a bird. When I say the word bird, your agents instantly pull up the bird frame.
And it has slots pre-filled with default assumptions. It has feathers. It has a beak. It builds nests. It flies.
You don't have to consciously think about those attributes. They are loaded instantly as a package.
Yeah, okay, but what if it's a penguin?
Well, if someone points and says, look at that penguin, you still retrieve the bird frame. But your agents quickly swap out the default flies assumption for swims while keeping the feathers and beak defaults perfectly intact.
This allows us to navigate a wildly complex world with extreme speed. We just slap default frames onto reality and only spend processing power adjusting the exception. But this brings up a paradox that Minsky highlighted. It's totally counterintuitive. He pointed out that for a computer, high-level logical reasoning, the stuff we think makes us geniuses, is actually incredibly easy to program.
Yes, we revere logic, calculus, playing chess. We view these as the pinnacle of human intellect. But from a programming standpoint, logic is just a simple, rigid set of rules creating a chain of reasoning.
If A, then B.
It is incredibly straightforward to code into a machine.
But teaching a computer common sense, that is nearly impossible.
Because common sense isn't a rule. Common sense is a messy, immense, chaotic society of millions of hard-earned practical ideas.
Right.
It is an intricate web of balances, checks, exceptions, physical causes, and cultural similarities.
It's the old AI joke. You can teach a supercomputer to beat a human grandmaster at chess in an afternoon. But try teaching that same supercomputer that you can pull a wagon with a string,
Right.
but you cannot push a wagon with a string.
The computer completely fails.
Because string physics isn't a clean logical equation. It's common sense, accumulated by millions of mindless agents interacting with the physical world over years of human childhood.
As Minsky famously wrote, and this might be the most important quote of his career, the trick of intelligence is that there is no trick.
There is no trick.
There is no magic algorithm. The power of the mind comes entirely from the vast diversity of these specialized mindless processes, constantly arguing, cooperating, and triggering one another.
Okay. I am on board. I understand the split-brain patients. I understand Minsky's society of mindless agents. But we have to address a massive, glaring paradox here.
Let's hear it.
If Minsky is right, and the mind is literally billions of mindless agents firing in parallel like a chaotic stock exchange floor, well, why doesn't it feel like that?
That is the million-dollar question in cognitive science.
Because I don't feel like a bureaucracy. I don't feel like a million parallel processes. I experience my life as a single, perfectly coherent, serial stream of thought.
One thing at a time.
Exactly. One thing happens, then the next thing happens, then I think a thought, then I feel an emotion. It is a single file line. If my brain architecture is massively parallel, why is my conscious experience so totally serial?
To solve that paradox, we have to look at a framework called Global Workspace Theory, or GWT.
Okay.
It was developed in the late 80s and 90s by a cognitive scientist named Bernard Bars, and it has been heavily refined using modern neuroimaging by researchers like Stanislas Dehaene.
GWT provides the actual mechanical explanation for how parallel processing creates that serial bottleneck we call consciousness. And these are fantastic metaphors.
We do. They ask us to imagine a theater.
So let's build this theater in the mind of the listener right now.
Imagine a vast, sprawling theater. In this metaphor, your consciousness, the part of you that feels awake and aware right now, is the stage. It is a small, brightly lit area.
Selective attention is the spotlight sweeping across that stage. And the specific contents of your consciousness at any given millisecond, a random thought about dinner, a memory of your childhood, the sound of my voice, those are the actors stepping into the spotlight.
But the stage is tiny, and the true power of the global workspace is not the stage, the spotlight, or the actors.
It's the audience.
The real power is the audience. Imagine a dark auditorium stretching out endlessly around the stage. Sitting in pitch blackness are billions of unconscious, highly specialized processors.
Minsky's mindless agents.
Yes, they are all sitting in the dark, silently watching the stage.
Let's prove to the listener how this works right now. Until 5 seconds ago, your brain was entirely unaware of the physical sensation of your socks pressing against your feet, or the feeling of your shoes.
Right.
The sensory agents processing the nerve data from your toes were sitting way in the back row of the dark auditorium. They were doing their job, tracking the pressure, but they were unconscious.
But the moment you mentioned their shoes, the spotlight of attention swung over. The foot sensation actor was pulled onto the brilliantly lit stage.
And when something steps onto the stage of the global workspace, it triggers what GWT calls the broadcast function.
The information in the spotlight is instantly broadcasted, brain-wide, to every single mindless agent sitting in the dark audience.
This broadcast function is revolutionary because remember, these agents are isolated. They don't normally talk to each other.
Right, but the stage acts as a universal bulletin board. Let's say your visual system agent spot a cup of hot coffee on a table. The visual system pushes the image of the coffee cup onto the stage.
The spotlight hits it. Broadcast.
Instantly, the entire audience sees the cup. The motor control agents in the dark see it and begin calculating the trajectory of your arm. The memory agents in the dark see it and instantly retrieve the conceptual memory of how hot coffee tastes and the pain of burning your tongue.
The language agents prep the vocal cords to say, "Careful, it's hot."
It creates a central information exchange. Suddenly, all these totally disconnected, mindless agents can coordinate a highly complex physical action based on this one globally available piece of information.
And this perfectly explains the serial bottleneck. It explains why you can only truly focus on one thing at a time. Broadcasting information brain-wide to billions of neurons requires immense metabolic energy.
It is an incredibly expensive biological operation.
You literally don't have the battery power to broadcast everything. If every agent in the audience tried to jump on stage at once and broadcast their data, it would be a deafening, chaotic roar of static.
Epilepsy is, in a way, what happens when too much of the brain starts broadcasting uncontrollably.
Wow.
So the bottleneck is a feature, not a bug. The stage can only hold one coherent play at a time to ensure clear communication.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The audience is not passive.
No, not at all.
Those mindless agents sitting in the dark aren't just eating popcorn and watching the show. They are actively evaluating the broadcast, and they have the power to intervene.
This introduces the concept of unconscious metacognition.
Metacognition usually means thinking about thinking. Like when you write an email, read it back, and consciously decide to change a word. That's conscious metacognition.
But GWT posits that we have incredibly powerful unconscious critics sitting in the dark audience. They monitor the conscious flow of the play, and if they detect a critical error or a severe threat, they can hit the fire alarm and completely hijack the spotlight.
Let's use the classic evolutionary example from the text, the snake detector.
Oh, this is a great one.
Imagine you were walking through the African savanna. Your conscious mind, the spotlight on the stage, is entirely focused on a beautiful bush in the distance. You are looking at the leaves, the way the hot sun casts shadows.
The bush actor is center stage.
Meanwhile, sitting in the absolute pitch black of the audience, deep inside your amygdala, is an ancient, highly specialized neural circuit. A mindless agent whose singular job, honed by millions of years of primate evolution, is to scan global visual broadcasts for snake-like shapes.
It is constantly analyzing the geometry, separating the curvature of real snakes from the straight lines of branches.
You are completely unaware of this agent, but suddenly, your eyes sweep over the ground, and for a fraction of a millisecond, the raw visual data of an S-curve hits your retina. The snake detector agent in the dark audience sees it.
And it acts instantly. It doesn't wait for your conscious mind to analyze the shape.
It hits the override switch.
It violently rips the bush actor off the stage, throws the snake alarm into the spotlight, and broadcasts a massive spike of adrenaline and motor commands.
You physically jump backward before your conscious mind even registers why you are jumping.
Exactly. Only after you are safe does the left brain interpreter step in and say, "Whoa, we just dodged a snake." The unconscious critic interrupted the conscious flow to save your life.
The theater of your consciousness is constantly being edited, rewritten, and aggressively directed by these unconscious processors operating entirely in the dark.
It's breathtaking, truly. When you map it all out, this decentralized, agent-based society, coordinated by a global workspace stage, narrated by a left-brain PR manager, it makes you marvel at the absolute pinnacle of human biology.
It is a marvel, but this is exactly where we need to profoundly shift our perspective, because human beings have a terrible habit of biological arrogance.
We really do.
We look at this intricate, decentralized intelligence, and we assume it is the pinnacle of evolution. We assume it is a uniquely human, or at least mammalian, trait.
Right, we have the biggest brains, so we must have invented the best system.
But this decentralized, agent-based society model, it isn't just an AI concept from the 70s, and it isn't a quirk of human neurology. It is the fundamental underlying blueprint of the natural world.
It was perfected by nature hundreds of millions of years before a neuron ever existed.
This is where we leave the human brain behind entirely. We are venturing into the realm of what researchers call cognition spaces, specifically basal and neural cognition.
Cognition without a brain.
Cognition without a single nerve cell. And to understand it, we have to look at an organism that sounds like a monster from a 1950s sci-fi movie. The giant single-celled slime mold, Physarum polycephalum.
It is a fascinating organism. It is a protist. It has absolutely no brain, no central nervous system, no sensory organs in any traditional sense.
The slime.
It is essentially a pulsing, yellow, microscopic bag of protoplasm that can grow to be several feet across. And yet, this brainless slime exhibits astonishing, quantifiable problem-solving behaviors.
It solves mazes.
It does. Japanese researchers conducted an incredibly famous experiment. They built a small physical maze, and they placed nutrient sources, specifically oat flakes, which the slime mold loves, at the entrance and the exit of the maze.
And then they just dropped a piece of Physarum in the center.
Normally, on a flat surface, the slime mold just expands outward in all directions like a puddle searching for food. But when constrained by the physical walls of the maze, something incredible happens.
It initially floods the entire maze, exploring every dead end. But once it locates the oat flakes, it fundamentally changes its physical architecture.
It begins to retract from the dead ends. The protoplasm concentrates and forms thick, pulsing, tubular veins that connect the two food sources.
And it doesn't just find a path. It finds the mathematically optimal, absolute shortest path through the maze. Every single time.
They took it a step further. In another experiment, researchers took a map of the Tokyo area. They placed the slime mold at the center, representing Tokyo, and they placed oat flakes at the geographic locations of the 36 surrounding major cities.
And the slime mold grew outward, found the oats, and then retracted into a network of veins.
But the resulting network wasn't random. The slime mold engineered a transport network that almost perfectly replicated the actual real-world Tokyo rail system.
A rail system that took human engineers decades and supercomputers to design for maximum efficiency and fault tolerance.
The brainless slime mold solved it in a matter of hours.
How is that possible? How does a bag of slime know the shortest path?
The crucial point is that it doesn't know. It isn't thinking about the maze. It isn't consciously calculating geometry or visualizing the map of Tokyo.
Let's use the physics analogy to explain this, because it translates the math into something we can easily grasp. The researchers modeled the slime mold's behavior using something called the Physarum Lagrangian model.
Right.
And they discovered that the slime mold behaves exactly like a resistive electrical network.
Think about how electricity flows through a circuit. If you have a battery and a bunch of wires of different lengths, the electrical current doesn't have to think about which wire to take.
It automatically distributes itself to minimize total power dissipation. It naturally finds the path of least resistance.
Or think about water flowing down a mountain. The water doesn't calculate the topography. Gravity and the physical shape of the rocks simply force the water into the most efficient channels.
The slime mold is doing the exact same thing biologically. It operates via a mechanism called shuttle streaming. The protoplasm rhythmically pulses back and forth.
When a section of the mold finds food, it pulses faster.
This mechanical pressure literally forces the tubes to expand. Tubes with high flow grow thicker. Tubes with low flow shrink and eventually disappear because maintaining them is metabolically too costly.
So the maze itself is acting as what researchers call an inert constraint field. The human-designed walls of the maze physically shape the space of viable solutions.
The slime mold's biological dynamics. The mindless pulsing agents inside its cell just naturally exploit that physical space.
It is a hybrid cognition system. The intelligence doesn't reside entirely in the organism. The solution arises from the physical interaction between the mindless biological agents and the physical constraints of the environment.
The slime mold is a perfect ancient example of Minsky's society. Simple, mindless contractile flows interacting to produce highly complex, optimized behavior.
But if you want to see this decentralized blueprint operating not just in a petri dish, but on a massive planetary scale, we have to look beneath the soil.
We're talking about the Wood Wide Web, the mycorrhizal fungal networks that blanket the Earth.
This is perhaps the greatest decentralized intelligence on the planet. Over 400 million years ago, a symbiotic relationship formed between early land plants and soil fungi.
The fungi are made up of microscopic threads called hyphae.
Yes, these threads literally fuse with the roots of trees and plants, spreading out for miles through the soil.
The fungal hyphae act as massive, hyperefficient extensions of the tree's root system. They mine the soil for water, phosphorus, and nitrogen that the tree's thick roots could never access on their own.
In exchange, the tree acts as a solar panel. It uses photosynthesis to create carbon-rich sugars, and it pumps a massive percentage of those sugars down into its roots to feed the fungi. It is a mutualistic trade.
But the mind-blowing part is the scale. These fungal networks don't just hook up to one tree, they connect multiple trees and entirely different species of plants into a vast, continuous underground web.
The ecological field studies reveal a staggering reality. In one heavily studied plot of forest, researchers took DNA samples from the soil and the roots.
And what did they find?
They found that a single fungal genotype 1 individual of a species called Lacaria was physically colonizing 100% of the Douglas fir trees in a 30 by 30 meter area.
100%. Every single tree in that forest plot was plugged into the exact same biological motherboard.
And there's an even crazier statistic. In a different study, they tracked a single one genetic individual of the fungus Suillus granulatus.
Okay.
It connected over 40 mature Douglas fir trees across a 2-kilometer zone.
2 kilometers of forest, all hardwired together by a single fungal organism. It's a subterranean network operating on the scale of human cities.
But the structure is only half the story. What is flowing through this network is where we see the true decentralized cognition. We aren't just talking about a passive scaffolding. We're talking about an active, highly regulated conduit for resources and information.
Researchers proved this using stable isotope tracing. They basically put a bag over a mother tree, injected radioactive carbon dioxide, and watched what happened.
The tree photosynthesized the radioactive carbon, pumped it into its roots, and the researchers tracked it as it flowed through the fungal network and popped up in neighboring trees and tiny seedlings meters away.
The older mature trees were actively subsidizing the young ones. Seedlings that were plugged into the network showed up to 127% greater biomass and significantly higher nitrogen content compared to seedlings that were isolated from the web.
But they aren't just sharing food. They are sharing data. They're sharing alarm signals. And this is exactly where it starts to mirror the brain's broadcast function from the global workspace theory.
Exactly. Let's say a Douglas fir tree is suddenly attacked by a swarm of herbivorous insects like aphids. The aphids start chewing on the needles.
The tree immediately produces chemical defense signals, specifically compounds like salicylic acid.
The tree hits the fire alarm.
And studies show that these chemical warning signals travel down the trunk, into the roots, across the mycorrhizal fungal bridges, and directly into the root systems of neighboring trees that haven't even been touched by an aphid yet.
The neighbors receive the chemical broadcast, and they react. Before the aphid even reach them, the neighboring trees preemptively initiate defensive physiological changes.
They start ramping up their own production of toxic, bitter compounds in their leaves.
They even release volatile organic compounds into the air that actively attract predatory wasps, which happen to eat aphids.
It is a decentralized, forest-wide immune response triggered by a chemical broadcast.
Okay, I have to stop here. I have to push back. Because when you read about the Wood Wide Web, especially in popular media or documentaries, it is incredibly easy to romanticize this. It sounds like the movie Avatar. It paints this picture of forests as these benevolent, socialist utopias. Ancient mother trees selflessly nurturing their young, sharing all their wealth, warning their neighbors purely out of love. Is it actually what is happening?
This raises an important question, and it's one that has triggered massive debate in the scientific community recently, because the popular narrative has skewed wildly toward anthropomorphism projecting human morals onto a forest. But recent meta-analyses published in journals like Nature and PNAS have heavily corrected this utopian misconception.
They describe the forest not as a utopia, but as a competitive, cooperative mosaic, right?
Yes, we have to strip away the human morality. A mother tree isn't consciously donating carbon out of maternal affection. Evolutionary biologists point out that the relationship between fungi and plants is often driven by intense, ruthless self-interest and hidden conflicts.
In fact, the movement of carbon from an old tree to a young sapling might not be directed by the old tree at all. It might be entirely driven by the fungus.
Exactly. The fungus is the one managing the physical pipes. And the fungus wants to maximize its own diverse portfolio of carbon sources. It wants resilience.
So the fungus might be actively pulling carbon out of a mature, healthy sunlit tree and pushing that carbon into a shaded, struggling seedling.
Not because the fungus loves the seedling, but because the fungus is keeping that seedling alive as a backup host in case the old tree falls over in a storm.
The fungus is farming the trees. It's creating host dependency to ensure its own survival.
It is exactly the dynamic Marvin Minsky described in The Society of Mind. You have independent agents. The various trees, the thousands of fungal species, the soil bacteria, they all have competing selfish interests.
But through their millions of local interactions, their chemical bartering, and even their parasitic tensions, they produce a highly robust, incredibly resilient, emergent ecosystem.
Decentralized logic. The forest isn't robust despite the ruthless competition and tension. It is robust because of it. The constant push and pull creates dynamic equilibrium.
Precisely. And this realization brings our deep dive directly out of the forest, out of the 1970s AI labs, and crashing right into the present day.
Because if we accept that the singular mind is a fallacy, if human brains, supercomputers, and global ecosystems all operate on this decentralized, emergent society of agents model, how does that change the way we live our lives right now?
It changes absolute everything because it ushers in what researchers are calling the post-singular paradigm. Think about human history. For centuries, we have built our societies, our corporate institutions, our legal frameworks, and our governments on the deeply flawed assumption of the singular mind.
The idea that a system must have a rational, top-down, central executive in charge to function.
We obsess over the CEO, the president, the singular database, the master algorithm. We demand that our massive human institutions operate with logical, unified intent.
But the reality is that human institutions behave exactly like the human brain. Think about a massive, sprawling government bureaucracy or a giant multinational corporation.
A bureaucracy does not operate with a single, unified intent. It is physically impossible.
It is a vast, messy collection of isolated local agents, departments, committees, middle managers, all interacting, competing for budgets, and reacting to local stimuli.
There is a brilliant comparison to be made here. Modern bureaucracies act exactly like the brain's left brain interpreter.
Oh, that is so true. Think about what a PR department or an executive summary actually does. A bureaucracy exists to take millions of chaotic, decentralized, localized actions by its employees and then convert them into rigid procedures, mission statements, and press releases.
It creates a post hoc narrative. It spins a story that mimics rational order and unified corporate intent, even when the underlying reality is just a million blind reactions.
We constantly demand transparency and singular accountability from systems like the economy or the healthcare system that are fundamentally incapable of it because they are emergent networks, not singular entities.
And this misconception becomes critically dangerous as we look at the immediate future of technology, specifically what researchers are terming human-AI hybrid cognition spaces, or the human bot.
This is where the boundary of the self completely dissolves, because we are no longer just using technology as a passive tool like a hammer. We are interacting continuously with massive swarms of artificial intelligence agents.
Large language models, autonomous training algorithms, foundation models. The boundary of where the human ends and the system begins is becoming completely ambiguous.
Think about xenobots. This is the perfect example of this blurring line. Xenobots are microscopic synthetic organisms built by taking living skin and heart cells from frog embryos and reshaping them.
But they aren't just biological oddities. A xenobot is an extended cognitive network. It includes the living frog cells, yes, but it also includes the evolutionary AI algorithms running on supercomputers that designed the xenobot's physical shape to optimize its movement.
It includes the human scientists who physically assembled the cells under a microscope based on the AI's blueprint, and it includes the robotic petri dishes they exist in.
Where does the organism actually reside? Where does the technology end and the biology begin? Where is the brain of the xenobot?
It doesn't have one. You cannot draw a clear line. The system is defined entirely by distributed function and collective agency across silicon, carbon, and human intention. There is no central controller.
And we are all becoming part of a massive xenobot. As we integrate more and more deeply with AI foundation models in our daily lives, using them to write, to code, to diagnose diseases, to manage our calendars, we are literally adding massive new societies of silicon agents to our own biological cognitive networks.
The human bot is this tightly coupled ecosystem of human and machine agents. And the warning here is clear. If we try to manage this hybrid future using the old, flawed, singular mind paradigm, if we expect a single point of central control or demand that AI systems operate with singular human-like intent, we will fail catastrophically.
We have to stop looking for the CEO. We have to start governing based on the stability of the entire network. We have to manage the traffic, not the individual steering wheels.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? This brings me to my final question, the big existential one.
Lay it on me.
If my conscious self is an illusion, if I am just a left-brain interpreter spinning PR stories to cover up the actions of millions of mindless biological agents, if I am fundamentally no different than a colony of slime mold or a web of underground fungus, isn't that incredibly depressing? Doesn't that completely rob us of our humanity, of our free will?
It is entirely natural to feel a sense of existential vertigo when you first grasp this, but I would argue it is the exact opposite of depressing. We are constrained by our poverty of words.
Right.
Our language forces us to use singular pronouns like I and me to describe a society of billions of interacting cells. But that illusion of the singular self is not a curse.
It's an evolutionary gift?
Exactly. That thin veneer of conscious agency, left brain interpreter, it stabilizes us. It is the crucial interface that allows us to function socially.
It allows us to build relationships, to fall in love, to tell the story of our lives, to take responsibility for our actions within a community.
We absolutely need the illusion of the singular self to survive among other humans. The trick isn't to destroy the illusion. The trick is to understand the magnificent machinery underneath it.
As Minsky noted, the true power of intelligence stems from our diversity. Our future success, whether we are talking about integrating with massive AI swarms or trying to manage the complex, collapsing ecosystems of our planet, depends entirely on our ability to embrace that distributed diversity rather than trying to force the universe into a centralized box.
We have to stop looking for the singular driver and start learning how to optimize the traffic.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to sit with this for a moment. Listen to the voice in your head right now. Feel the weight of your body in your chair. Feel that unified sense of you.
It is a magnificent, beautiful performance.
It is the grand final act on the stage of your global workspace, lit by the spotlight of attention, written in real time by your left brain interpreter, and performed flawlessly by a cast of billions of mindless biological agents operating entirely in the dark.
And we want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to mull over. We've seen how a vast forest can act as a massive, decentralized mind without a central brain. And we've seen how your own brain acts as a decentralized society without a true CEO.
So as billions of human beings become increasingly connected to each other through the internet, and as we become inextricably biologically and economically linked to vast swarms of artificial intelligence agents operating across the globe, are we no longer the individuals we think we are?
As the boundaries between human, machine, and nature blur entirely, are we as humans simply becoming the mindless, microscopic agents inside the emerging singular society of mind of the Earth itself?
It is a question that reframes our entire existence as a species, just like realizing the true nature of a magic trick. Once you see the true, fractured, terrifyingly beautiful complexity beneath the surface, you can never look at yourself in the mirror the exact same way again. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time. Heliox is produced by Michelle Brucker and Scott Bleakley. It features reviews of emerging research and ideas from leading thinkers, curated under their creative direction with AI assistance for voice, imagery, and composition. Systemic voices and illustrative images of people are representative tools, not depictions of specific individuals. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other episodes, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.